It was a residential project, but I was interested in working on public landscapes. But at the same time, when we were working on that first phase, I think I and the team that I was working with at PWP had hopes that it would be open to the public one day. So we ended up making these design decisions at a detail level that were related to the potential for it to be more publicly accessible in the future, even when we were in that way. So one thing that was exciting was even the day that the opening happened in the fall of 2006 on the Phase 1 project, the owner made an announcement that he was thinking of donating the property and the art collection and the project to a museum, when in the future. We're excited that we had made these decisions that would allow it to transition in an easier way because there was the potential. And then it was some years later, 2007-8 was when the idea of Phase 2 came up from the owner, and when the foundation was made that ultimately runs Glenstone now. So we started first doing master planning and landscape planning level design studies for a second museum that would allow more of the collection to be shown and would be open for more days than the 2 or 3 days that the first museum was open. What we have done are smaller presentations that look at how the site might get further developed, where art might go in the future, where their new buildings might go if there are new buildings, and also how landscape and planting and vegetation matures and changes through time. For the most part, the areas we've defined as meadow are intended to be maintained as meadow. They're not meant to go through succession and turn into forest. In the core of the property and the core of the visitor area. Further out areas, we have screening woods and forests that I've described, or ecological forest around the edges of the wider property, the 300 acres. And we also have some areas there that are meadow today that may be successional landscape spaces that would transition from meadow today to forest in the future. And we're open to that, and that's been described in our future master plan. They're being allowed to go successively into forest over time. I think the whole owner, museum, design team, management team, and maintenance team are all working with the same goals. But I think that is something that being honest about goals, not pushing things too hard, too early, but staying, as part of a collaborative team process can pay off, and you can be working on the same site, 18 years later and have reached new levels, all of you. I think it's interesting culturally and internationally speaking about this, because in the United States, and then changing in different parts of the world. If they hear it's a low maintenance landscape, most in the United States would think it's a no maintenance landscape, which would mean that the landscape design that's low maintenance is one that's done and stays the way it is, forever, which is just not the case with any landscape. Any landscape design, any garden, any living thing will not stay the same all the time. Other cultures and other places, Europe, Japan, China, I think there's a mix. There's an understanding that you need to maintain and work with and manage the systems that you've established, either to allow them and guide them through change, or to keep them looking the way that you want them to look. Like bonsai is an example, or in Japanese gardens. It's pruned and fed and watered, taken out of its pot, its roots are pruned, it's put back in its pot, and that can go on for 200, 300, 500 years. The tree looks more mature and older, its trunk gets more worn and bigger, but overall it still stays the same size. But the only reason it stays the same size is because of the amount of care, that it's given. And so I think that analogy is something we use with a lot of clients, which isn't that every landscape is as much maintenance as bonsai or as much is controlled as much as bonsai are. But that's a good example of the idea that if you want a garden or a place that looks a certain way or exists in a way that is within bounds, between here and here, there is a gardening and management and maintenance that has to go along with it. I think it's astute what you're saying, and it's great to hear actually, because it relates to goals that we have today at PWP, but also to sort of the core goals of the practice. While the projects may have gotten more and more complex, and we may increase either the technical complexity or the biodiversity or the ecological benefits or the effects, in projects, we've also tried to maintain something which was, say, called minimalism at other points in time in the office, or an intentionality and clarity of the design that stays through. So the design goals don't get mixed up with trends or a lot of like a drive to be new for new's sake, but really looking back to how do you make places that are memorable? How do you make places that are in scale, or create both human scale but also a bigger landscape scale? And how do you find a place for people inside of a place that has a landscape power to it? And I think those are what we're trying to do, whether it's Glenstone or the sports complex or Jewel at Changi Airport or the World Trade Center Memorial.